Alright, good morning folks. I'm Aaron Heiser of Maker's Leather Supply, and this morning we're going to be building a tablet case. This is by far one of my most favorite designs I've ever done. We did make a template for this for the Tandy leather stores. This is the third of 3 exclusive templates that they asked me to make for them that will only be available in their stores. But anyway, we'll just show you some of the features here and stuff, and then we're going to get to it. But this is the tablet case right here. It looks like a real fancy, pretty book. You can open it up. It's got a notepad in it and a pen holder there. But my favorite part of this is that it kickstands. So it's a pretty neat design. And then the other thing that I had to make sure of this is that it'll hold an array of size tablets. The mounting for the tablet is actually on elastic, so it'll hold all kinds of tablets. I think this is like a 10.4 inch or so, and it's not the biggest one it'll hold by far. So anyway, the best part about this project people are going to love is there's no skiving involved. I know that a lot of my lately videos have involved a lot of skiving and stuff, and that is a challenge for some folks. No skiving here. This is all flat work. This is a really neat project. The biggest drawback is it does take a good bit of leather, but that's okay because the end result is totally worth it. So without further ado, I'm going to adjust the camera where you can see what's really important, which is my workbench and not me, and we're going to get on this. So here we go. Alright, so the first thing we'll discuss is the anatomy of the templates themselves. They're always labeled with what they are and what you need to cut them out of. So this is piece 1. This is the cover pieces, so the front and the back of the book essentially. You have to cut 2 of these out of some 8 to 9 ounce, and then it also says you need to cut 2 out of some 2 to 3 ounce, which would be for the liner. But when I'm doing lining pieces, I never cut them actually to size. I would overcut those, and then we'll trim them down once they're all glued up, and we'll go over that. All right. Piece number 2 is the actual tablet holder. See how it has these little punches in it? You'll need to cut 2 of them out with those little punches, and then 2 more of them, or sorry, 1 of them without the holes, and I'll explain how that works. This piece that kickstands out here is 3 pieces of leather thick. Okay, so on the back side you can't see all that elastic sewn in and stuff like that. You could leave it there, but man, it sure is a nice clean, to not have it back there. So on the front side we have our elastic, and it goes in, in behind these pieces using those punched out slots there, okay? And it gets sewn in there to the front piece, all right? Well, the middle piece actually has big squares cut out of it for those elastic pieces to sit flushly in between the front and the back. So you squeeze this, you can feel the little cut out squares, but yet when you close this, you don't have like giant lumps and stuff in your project, making it look like it won't close flatly. Okay, so that's why this piece is, you have to cut out 3 of them. And again, I say have to, you don't have to. You could just make this out of 1 thick piece even if you wanted, and sew these to the back. But all of my designs and all of my work really is, I try to make everything as professional as I can. So I'll show you how I would do it, and then if you need to modify it for your, what you've got in your shop, then go for it. So yeah, that's what we got there. So that was that piece. The next piece, the piece number 3, is the notebook holder. Okay, and that's just this little sleeve right here that the mini pad goes into. Okay, this is one of those mini legal size pads. I think it's 5 by 8 or something like that. We'll measure it up before this is all done. It's a very common size. I got them at Walmart. Same with my elastic. Once we go to putting that in there, I'll explain it to you, but my elastic, let me grab it down here. There it is. I got this at Walmart, and it's a 1/2 inch wide, just nice elastic. So, all right. The last piece that we need to talk about is going to be our gusset piece, and notice this one has this nice scalloped edge on it right here. You could make that a square cut if you wanted to, but I really like that scallop. And then I also, you only have to cut out one of these from one type of leather, but I cut out 2 of them out of 2 different colors, and I just really think that little accent there really gives this book something special. Since it's a plain book with no tooling or anything, I really think that matching the interior color is really nice. And we're actually going to do the exact same thing to the one we're building today. The one I'm building today will have that tan color as the accent on the interior, and then on the outside it'll be black. Again, you don't have to go through all the work to put 2 of those in there, but I really think it looks really nice. And yeah, I mean, it's just one more thing to make your stuff look, you know, fancier and worth more money. Most importantly, for the folks that are reselling their items and things like that. All right, so without further ado, we will get going. I went ahead over on my heavy cutting table with my bigger knife. I went ahead and cut out 2 of the 8 to 9 ounce cover pieces, but I have not done the liners yet. All right, this is just some English bridle. Since this is not going to be a tooled book, I'm using leather that's already finished. So this is just some bridle leather that I'm using. I know Tandy's got lots of leathers out there that are that can be comparable to that, and you can use for this. You just need a rigid kind of leather that's gonna, you know, you don't want it to be all floppy and stuff. So that's the only real qualification you'll have. So the other thing I'm going to cut out here on the camera, I'll go ahead and cut out a couple of these. Now, we talked about this being 3 pieces of leather thick, and that middle piece, honestly, it can be just junk leather. It doesn't need to be anything nice. It doesn't need to be anything pretty. No one will see anything but the edge burnished into your other edges. So it really can just be any old scrap of leather that's about 4 to 5 ounces thick. So there you go. I mean, like I said, this thing does take a lot of leather, but there you go. You got to save a piece there. So I'm going to go ahead and put a new blade on my scalpel here, and I'll go ahead and cut one of these out. And the scalpel blade just stuck together. I'll go ahead and cut one of these out, and then I will move on to cut out one of the binding pieces with those scallops on it and stuff, and then I'll have to pause the camera and I'll go ahead and cut out the rest of my just repetitive pieces, because there's just no reason for you to have to watch me do that over and over and over. So I've got my scalpel here, brand new blade. To me, a brand new blade's a lot easier than trying to sharpen stuff, so I'm getting better at sharpening. I've always said I was terrible at it, but I'm getting much better at it, but I still don't like doing it. So, all right. Nice fresh blade, sure cuts this stuff really well. And the first time, most importantly. Oop. I go to say that, and then look what happens. Alright, so there's one of 3 pieces that I'll cut out for this. And I do have some marks and some scarring on this piece of leather, and that's the one I'm going to use for that middle piece. That doesn't matter. Alright. So the binding piece, since I'm going to make it out of 2 layers of leather, I'm actually going to use a fairly thin piece of black leather. It's just more of the bridle leather that matches the thicker piece over there, but it's thinner. This one's actually 2 to 3 ounce, and then I'll marry it up to the tan piece I'll cut out will be a 4 to 5 ounce, and then that will give me the 6 to 7 ounce that this thing requires for a nice binding that's not going to be so loose that the project's floppy and stuff like that. So scallops can be difficult to cut out. I realize that. Hopefully these templates help a little. I know my shoulder's right in the camera here on this part of it. One of these days I'm going to have a cameraman. Maybe when my 7-year-old really wants to earn the money that he talks about he wants to earn, maybe I'll say, well, hold this camera. We'll see how good of a video we have then. So he gets distracted easily. He's 7. So for these scallops, I'll take my scalpel and I'll just go nice and slow and follow that line, and then when I get to one of these points, I'll come out and just cut that piece off. And that'll help keep that point kind of sharp as opposed to trying to round around it and not being able to make the turn. All right. Now I've come to where there's an inward point here, so what I'm going to do is turn my knife around, start back at that point, and work my way back to my cut. And there we go. Now we'll have a little sharp inward point as well. And here we go again. Again, I've come to a point on the outside, so I'll just go ahead and cut that off, and now I will finish my cut. So there should be a nice pretty scalloped piece. I will clean up, got a tiny bit of an overcut there where those two met, and it's gone. Nice pretty piece. So we'll set that one to the side. Again, I'm going to pause the camera. I'll go ahead and cut out that little rectangle. There's nothing to that. It can be cut out of, it says 4 to 5 ounce on it, but it can be cut out of even 2 to 3 ounce as well. And then I'm going to cut out the other 2 of these, and I will rough cut out some linings for the cover pieces. That'll be 2 to 3 ounce of the tan, because all of my interior is going to be tan. Alright, so as I was going through cutting stuff out, I'd forgotten to mention something with the accent piece that I'm going to do with this. When you cut that one out, it does need to be a touch wider than the original piece, alright, because like it is, you have to have a little bit of it sticking out right there so that it actually shows and is your accent piece. So anyway, just a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch, somewhere in there, 3/8 of an inch, whatever looks nice to you with the leathers and the thicknesses that you're using. It's not an exacting thing. I will warn, if you're going to use a sewing machine, make sure it's big enough that you can walk that foot on both layers. Okay, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to back this piece up a little bit. I will cut out this straight side here and the 2 ends. I'll go ahead and cut parts of them out. Alright, now I will move it forward, and if you're not very good at eyeballing stuff and keeping it even and everything, then you may want to just measure this out, but I'm pretty decent at it, so I'm just going to test my luck, which, don't get me wrong, that still fails me sometimes, so I'm not that good. So anyway, now I'll finish cutting out these sides here, and then I'll cut those front scallops out. Sometimes this is a little awkward because I try really hard to keep everything on camera and where you can see it. So, all right. Okay, now I can do my scallops just like I did before, even though this is a little bit thicker piece of leather, not much. You do want to try to follow that line just as well as you can. Scallops can really look nice on a project, but they've got to be as symmetrical as you can get them. Otherwise, they just look like a bunch of rough cut lines. Probably should even cut these out first while my scalpel was sharpest. That's okay. All right, so that's going to look pretty dang nice with the black and the tan. I've made a couple of wallets out of these two colors, and normally a lot of folks have heard me say I don't like using black leather, and that's still very true, but yeah, I think this will be real nice. So all right, I'm going to pause the camera, reset some tools here, and when I come back, we're going to get to putting some things together. Okay, so we're going to start with the, excuse me, the most tedious part of this project, which is the part that holds the tablet in. All right, so we're gonna create all these little tabs right here, and create this entire middle section. To later be just sewn into the book that we'll make. All right. So, like I said, I cut out 3 of these, just like the instructions told me to, or the what's written on the tablet. And I have one piece here that is just obviously much uglier than the other. Looking at it on the camera, you can't tell, but there are some scars. When you roll it up, it's got just, I don't know, the grain on it's real loose and everything. It's just not near as nice as these other 2 pieces. So this will be my middle piece. All right, this will be the piece that nobody will ever see. So I'm going to take this piece, and I've got to put my those slot holes in it. Okay, and I've shown people before that you don't have to have the fancy bag punch or oblong punch for this, but it does help, and it makes things a lot faster. All I'm going to do is, I'm not going to dare try to punch through this template, because guaranteed this punch will not fit through that hole enough. I mean, it'll set in it, but it won't fit in there enough to go all the way to my cutting board without breaking my acrylic template. Okay, so I'm just going to take my little scratch awl, and I'll trace out all those little 8 holes, and you know, I don't have to worry about getting them exactly in there and everything, because again, this is the middle piece that no one will ever see. Okay, so it's okay. All right, so I've got my my areas scratched out there. If I take it down a little bit, you can see the areas. I'm going to take my maul and my punch, and I'm going to knock those out right quick. Okay, now I need to take my front piece and do the exact same thing, except I will be a little bit more careful, making sure that all my hole punches are in exactly the right spots. Okay, so I'm going to pause the camera, and I'm going to do that exact same thing on this piece of leather. Okay, so now I have 2 of these with their holes punched in them. The other thing I have to make, and there's not a template for it, because just don't need one at all, is these little tabs that we're going to put on the elastic. And these aren't really a necessity, but they definitely make it easier to put the tablet in, and I like that since it's rigid right here, I think it might stay around the corners of the tablet a little bit better. I don't know, I haven't tested that theory. I just thought that it should have something. And it also, again, adds to the, hey, this is handmade, as opposed to a store-bought tablet case. So anyway, but all this is, it is 1 inch wide and about 2 1/4 inches long, I believe. But we're going to make one of those right quick. I'll show you how easy it is to make a set of those. Somewhere around here I had a scrap that I'd already cut off for such a purpose. And I guess I'll have to pause the camera while I find that scrap, so give me a second. Okay, sorry about that. Alright, so this piece is 1 inch wide. It's out of the 2 to 3 ounce leather, just some of the scrap that we have left over from cutting out our lining pieces over there. Alright, all you have to do is start with a straight edge. I like my centering ruler, I've explained it before. It has an 1/8 inch grid on half of it, and then the other half of it is it doesn't have that. Anyway, well, it's 2 inches wide, so the 1/8 inch grid part's wide, 1 inch wide, and the other part's 1 inch wide. So that's how, if I need 1 inch wide little scrap or piece, I just take one of these rulers and go to town on it. Make this thing fit. So all I'm going to do is I'll make sure that my edge is already straight, which I believe it is there. Yep, we're starting with a straight edge. So all I'm going to do is take this ruler, I'll turn it upside down so that I can have the lines, and I know the lines are hard to see on the camera, but I've got the lines for the 1/8 inch grid, the last one of them perfectly aligned with the edge of the leather, and that tells me that now this is going to be 1 inch wide. Alright, so cut it out, and there it is, 1 inch wide strip. And I use 1 inch wide strips for all kinds of stuff, so that's a really convenient part of this ruler that I didn't even think of when I designed the thing. It just happened that way. So alright, so I'm going to cut out 2 of them because I need 4 of those tabs, and I'll show you how scientific it gets when I go to making those tabs and figuring out how long they are, because that's a piece that's folded in half. So what I do is I kind of fold this piece over like this, right? And again, this is extremely scientific. I mean, you got to really put on your thinking cap for this one. Alright, I've got my 1 inch round punch here, and all I'm doing is bringing it down to where the tips of the punch are right at the end of the fold. Alright, and I mean, when I designed the very first one, this is exactly how I did it. I was like, that'll do right there. So there we go, I have 1 tab. For those of you that may not have a round punch, I fully understand what that's like. I promise I haven't always had all these tools. So we'll measure it, and this thing is 2 1/4 inches long. I was actually right when I said that earlier. So I need 4 of these, so we're going to fold it in half again. I'll bring the punch down to the end. If you don't have this fancy punch, again, 2 1/4 inches long, and pull a quarter out of your pocket. A US quarter is right about 1 inch, and cut around it with your scalpel. If you don't have a quarter, well, then you must be a leather worker, because we're all broke. So yeah. So there's, I've got 2 of them now, I need 4. So here's the 3rd one. And then I gotta find that other piece I cut to get the 4th one out. I knew I'd need 2 pieces. Okay. Number 4. All right. I'm going to go ahead and prep each of these pieces by folding them really sharply in half, okay, because I need them to have a little bit of a, I need them to hold a fold once I go to put them on the elastic, okay. And I'm going to cut out some little pieces of my double-sided tape. I've got every tool you can think of except for a pair of scissors over here. I'll use the scalpel and I'll pick up some scissors the next time I'm got the camera paused. And I'm just going to take the double-sided tape and I'll put it on one side of each of these folds, okay? I was actually supposed to make this video what I would call last night, but it's now like 3 a.m. I went ahead and went home and got a little bit of sleep. And yeah, I figure if it's still posted by the time anybody wakes up this morning, it's probably okay. Still counts as night, right? The life of an entrepreneur. What's sleep? All right, so now to cut our elastic. Elastic's really cheap, so I mean, I think this piece, don't hold me to this, I want to say I paid less than $1 for this like 25 yards of elastic. Okay, so I'm just gonna take and cut off kind of long-ish sections. Let's see, this is 10 inches long, guaranteed to be way longer than what I need, but that's okay. I would rather have it way long than short. Okay, so there was 1, 2, and when I say 10 inches long on elastic, that's with it relaxed, okay, not with it stretched. There's 3. And for the bilinguals that are watching, here is cuatro. There you go. Your Spanish lesson for the day. I like Big Bird, right? Okay. So now I'm going to take where I put that double-sided tape, right? I'll go ahead and pull the backing off of it. And I will put that, I mean, 100% exactly in the center of that. I mean, you know, not a millimeter or partial of an inch to the left or the right of center, I'm sure, because, you know. But anyway, I'm just going to lay this across here as centered as I can, and I'll fold that thing closed. There it is. That one's ready to sew. And I was just kidding about that whole, you know, exactly center thing. It's fine. That's why we overcut them. Okay. So yeah, we'll do that a couple more times just because it was fun and we like doing things that are fun, right? Now, like a fool, I put this piece of tape on sideways. I should have put it that way so that it would hold the elastic and the thingy together. But yeah, didn't think of that until the second one, now did I? So, let's get another piece of tape. Luckily, this roll has 60 yards on it, so, you know, I can waste that ½ inch, it'd be all right. As much as I don't like to waste anything. A point of talking, I did want to say that a lot of the time when you're making a template like this one, and it's not a wallet or something that's, you know, specifically going to have to fit inside your pocket or whatever, you know, I realize that this template calls for several different weights of leather, okay? Those really are they're suggestions, you know. I understand that not everybody has a warehouse right out their door that they can just go out there and pick all the leather that they want. I get it. I remember what it was like when I started in this hobby, and I didn't have the resources that I have now, having, of course, a store here. So, you know, if something calls for a 2 to 3 ounce lining and you only have 4 to 5, then line that sucker with 4 to 5. Who cares? All right. So I just want to put that out there. You know, leather is all about working with what you got and making it work for you. All right. And if you have to change the design of something, or, you know, the components of something to match your tools or your ability or whatever, you know, go for it. And it will make you a better leather worker, that you went outside the box and you did something that needed to be done. All right, I'm going to pause this. I'm going to set up my sewing machine, and all I'm going to do is sew little rectangles to sew these tabs onto the elastic pieces. All right, so over here at the sewing machine, I have, this is the Class 26, the lightweight cylinder arm machine. I have it loaded up with size 138 color natural thread. I love the natural thread. Unlike white, it doesn't stand out too much, especially when you're using it on darker colors. And it doesn't look dirty like white thread can after it gets old. So real simple. I'm just going to sew a little rectangle here on each of these, just to hold that elastic in there. All right, so nothing to it. I'll do one for the camera, and then I'll pause the camera, and when I come back, we'll magically be done with all 4 of them. I could very easily be using a flatbed machine for this project. This is all flat work, but my flatbed machine, I would have to adjust camera angles and stuff for it, instead of just simply turning the camera around from where I was standing, which is what I've done now. So it's not that this machine's any better than that one for this project. It's that I'm lazy and I don't want to move my camera a bunch. Sorry for any of y'all that think I work really, really hard. I hate to bust your bubble. Alright, back to our original stitch hole there, so I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of extra stitches to do my overstitch there. Okay, I still don't have a pair of scissors, but I do have a scalpel, so I'll just rough cut this off with a scalpel, and I'll go back with my trim it in a little bit. But there's what we're looking at right there. Let me get it where you can actually turn the brightness down a little bit. That'll help. There. So there's what we're looking at. Just a small rectangle sewn on there, and then I'll trim all those threads off, of course. And I've got 3 more of those to do. So, all right. So see this jumbled mess right here? I daisy chained them so that I wasn't just cutting each individual one off the sewing machine, mostly because I still didn't have a pair of scissors over there. But now I got off my lazy self and got me a pair of scissors. So I'm going to cut these apart, and then I'm going to do my scalpel trick on cutting the threads flush with the project. All right. For anybody that's never seen that, I take a really nice sharp scalpel blade. Okay, and I take my I'm holding my string. Take that scalpel blade and put it right there at the base of the string, and then I don't move the scalpel because that can lead you to nick your leather and cut your leather. I move the string, and there we go, nice and flush. Don't have to burn it off or anything like that, and it looks great. It's a braider's trick. Guys that braid rawhide and leather, that's one of the things that they do when they're finishing off their knots and stuff. That's where I learned it. And it works. back here I had a stitch or my loose thread got pulled into another stitch there, so I got to pull that out. So anyway, I'll do that same trick on the back side here, and yeah, and then I'll do the other ones, and then we'll start placing these into the piece that's going to hold them. Alright, I got all my threads trimmed there, and now it's time to put the straps on into this piece of leather. And I want to talk about that for a second before we just go executing stuff. And I use the word execute deliberately. Okay, so when I first showed you this tablet case, it was holding this tablet right here. But it also holds this tablet right here. That's the reason for the elastic, alright? So when we do what we're about to do and put these little straps in here, I can't give you a definitive, you know, oh, it's, you know, an inch of elastic hanging outside the leather or whatever. You're going to have to kind of use your judgment with the elastic that you have. Some of it's weaker, some of it's stronger. You might have a piece that's wider or more narrow, things like that. I will tell you everything we're doing, and I won't just leave you in the dark with it. But see, this thing holds this tablet really well, and it holds this large one just as well. And that's the goal with this thing, is that, you know, maybe you only do custom work, and this is specifically for one person's tablet, or maybe you are making it to take, you know, as a sample at a craft fair that you're hoping to sell it. And you need, you know, the buyer to know that, hey, no matter what size tablet they've got, as long as it's not bigger than, you know, this sheet of leather, then it's going to fit. Now, I got on Apple's website, and I looked up their iPad dimensions, and there you go. The prototype to this was much simpler. And there's my poor man's iPad right there. I just stacked up some leather and glued it together, and I made an iPad out of it. All right, and so I know that this thing will fit an iPad, because not everybody's a Samsung guy like me. Some people like these silly things. I'm not knocking iPads, they're pretty awesome. I just don't have one. So anyway, again, I know that this thing will fit an array of tablets, and the most popular tablets. Like that's the biggest key. Look up the most popular ones, you know, that your friends and family are using, and build you one up out of leather, cardboard, whatever, and make sure what you're about to do fits it. And then look up a little bitty one like this and make sure what you're doing fits it too. And then you're good. All right. So now that all my rambling is done, hopefully I've made some sense to you. Excuse me. We're going to do that exact thing. So I'm going to use a lot of double-sided tape, because initially I'm just going to stick those little straps in here with double-sided tape. All right. Now, when I sewed these, the finished side is what is up on the sewing. Okay, the back of your sewing looks like complete hammered mess if you used a sewing machine, probably, because this is super thin plus the elastic in the middle, blah 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 blah. All right, so to go around the corners of a tablet, you know, and look right without being folded and rolled over and all that craziness, I hold it down just like that, and then I take this piece and I fold it under, okay, and then I put it down through one of these little holes. So it really, so it looks like that, okay? The fold goes down, so that when that goes out, you've got to think about how that would wrap around the corner of something, and there it would do it naturally, as opposed to if it was folded the other way, it would not naturally fold over the tablet, okay? So I'm going to take and do the exact same thing on the other one there, and pull it down until they're about even. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and double-sided tape that sucker down there just like that. And there's there's a 1/2 inch from the bottom of that little tab to where these holes are, okay? And we'll just stick with a 1/2 inch because it looks about right compared to the one I did before. All right, so I'm gonna carefully place that upside down, and I'm gonna go to the back side of it, and I'm gonna double-sided tape it down. Okay, so here's my double-sided tape. And on the back side, this is going to look like a mess, an absolute mess. They're going to be overlapping each other and all this craziness. That's fine. We're going to clean it all up later, and we're going to hide it in between layers of leather. So that's cool. All right, now I'm going to double-sided tape back here. And I'm only going to leave about 1 inch or so of elastic between where it comes through the hole and where the tape begins. Okay? And then I'm just going to run that tape, or let me pull the back off the tape. All right. So I'm just going to pull that to where it basically runs straight down. Okay, and I'll just push it up against the back of the leather there. And then I'll do the exact same thing with this other one here. Leave about 1 inch of space between where it comes through the leather and where the tape begins. Pull the back off my tape. Flop it over, pull it up from where I made the mistake there, and pull it through. Now, I will go back to the other side and make sure that it's still nice and straight, and you know, one side's not way longer than the other and stuff like that. And then I'm going to also just compare it to the one I made here just to make dang sure. And you know what? Honestly, this is too long. So we're going to pull it in a little bit more. We'll pull it down to about 3/8. There we go. So now, if this thing's set flush, it is 3/8 of an inch from the little gaps. Okay? And that'll be about right. Now, if you put your fingers here and kind of hold it on the back side, you'll see how much that sucker can stretch to, you know, go around a much larger tablet. All right. Now, I have 3 more of those to do, and you don't want to watch me do it or listen to me talk while I do it. So, I'll be talking to myself while I pause the camera. Okay. So here we have it. Here's the outside. It's all nice and pretty. And looks pretty good, I think. And then we have the jumbled mess on the backside. We'll worry about that later. Again, that's why we do 3 layers here. We can hide all that. Now I'm going to go ahead and this is only held on with double-sided tape, so I have to be very, very careful. But I'm going to go ahead and double-sided tape on the back of my tablet. I'm going to go ahead and slide these suckers into the tabs and make sure it's nice and tight and that it'll hold both of these sizes of tablets that I have. Okay, so that's pretty secure. The other thing you want to make sure is that it will sit straight. If these, you know, if you have way too long of one or something, it might sit really crooked. And this one looks like it's sitting pretty straight. So cool. I know it's working with a smaller one. And again, I'm being very careful because these are just taped in right now. We'll put my larger tablet in it, which is very comparable to a iPad size, so I don't need to worry about using my poor man's iPad over there. All right, and there's the large tablet. Holds it nice and even. Looks pretty squared off with the piece of leather and everything, so I think we're good. I'm gonna go ahead and pull it back out before it rips all the tape off the backside and I have to do it all over again. Okay, so now, what do? We've got that. We need to sew down those straps on the back side so that we can trim them off. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take, and again, I'm gonna use my 1-inch measurement here, and I'm just gonna draw some lines at 45-degree angles, or well, it's a 90-degree angle, but basically parallel with each of the where the slots are that these come out of. Okay, and I'll do it about 1 inch below the slots. I'll just grab me a real nice light line here. And then when I go to sew these on, I'll make those little sew lines look like just arrows, basically. And that should make them dressy enough and uniform enough that it'll look good. Okay. Kind of hard to see. See if I can turn it some direction or something that you can see barely see my lines right there. But anyway, there's one right there, and I'm going to put those on the sewing machine in just a second, but I have to draw 2 more on the other side. Alright, so I'm just going to sew those 2 little corners, and then we can turn this sucker over and clip all that ugliness off, and I'll show you how we do our middle layer. Alright, so I'll spin my camera around to my sewing machine. There's nothing to this line at all. This is another one of those projects, I hadn't said it out loud yet, but this could easily be hand sewn, especially since it's all flat work. But there is a lot of sewing involved, so I'm using a machine because I can't take 3 days to make this thing. And it's not that it takes 3 days of solid sewing, it's that it would take me 3 days with all the phone ringing and people coming in the door and all that. That's why most of my videos are made at 4 and 5 in the morning, because otherwise, there's always folks coming in, which is a great thing. Don't get me wrong, I love it. But it doesn't help me get videos done. I'm damn near off camera now, I'm sorry. There we go. Alright, so there's one of my sew lines. It goes completely across the straps on the back side. As you can see, it goes there. So next I can cut those off in a minute, but first I have to do it down here as well. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so I got my triangle sewn in there, and this sucker's done as far as this piece is concerned, minus this magical mess we have back here. Okay, so we're going to clean that up. I'm going to pull these off where the double-sided tape is. Okay, just going to pull them up here, and then I'm going to trim them back a little bit. Yeah, some good tape. Alright, and that doesn't have to be all crazy even or anything like that. I just want to trim them off to where there's not a ton of bulk down there. Okay. About like so. All right, now we have to figure out now that middle piece of leather. All right, the one that's going to make it to where you don't have the bulk. Like if you push down on this right now, you can see and feel the bulk. You can feel the straps underneath there, and I don't want that. I want it to sit nice and flat. I want the tablet nice and flat up against this piece. That way when the book closes, you don't see a bunch of gaps and stuff in there. Okay? So, again, we have a very, very scientific method for doing such a thing. All right, we're going to put this on top of our piece that's going to be behind it. And I'm going to line them up as perfectly as I can. Hold them down. And then I'm going to take a hammer. And I'm going to beat where those straps are. Okay? And just beat the tar out of it. Now you need a very nice, smooth, flat face hammer. Don't go using the one that you hang all your pictures in your house with. or the one with the giant grid on it because you're a framing contractor. Don't do that. Use a nice smooth face hammer because otherwise you're going to mar up this piece of leather. If you don't have a smooth hammer like this, no problem. Get your little scrap piece of leather and move it around and bang on it on top of this. Know what I mean? So like if I didn't have a smooth hammer, I'd take this piece, even though this one's way too thin, 4 to 5 ounces or more, and I'd beat on it, and then that would save me from marring up my nice leather, okay? But I got a smooth hammer. Okay, did it there. Now I'm going to do it over here. Now, if that worked well and I hit it hard enough, you'll see your straps imprinted into the back piece there. Okay? And you can't really see it that well, unfortunately, but I can see it well enough. So I'm going to take my scalpel and I'm going to cut it out. Where I see those marks, I'm going to cut. I'm just going to cut out basically a gigantic square. And again, this doesn't have to be pretty because no one will ever see it. Well, minus the people that are watching this video. You're seeing mine right now. I don't want to cut away a ton of leather in here because, well, you still want the bulk and the rigidness from it. You just don't want to be able to see your straps back there. Okay, so there you go. That's about as pretty as you'll ever see me cut. So here we got to do that again over here. And in case you're wondering if you've ever wanted to make a pair of flip-flops, very same design with the midsole where the straps go into the top sole there. There's a midsole, and you do this exact same thing. You just cut out all that area where those straps are, and then whoever's walking on them doesn't feel those straps underneath their feet. I've got a rule when I make sandals and flip-flops, which I don't make very many, but if I can't stand at Six Flags all day in a line for a roller coaster in these sandals because they're uncomfortable, then they're not good enough. I see a lot of people throwing sandals and footwear out there that I'm just like, there's just no way that that's got to be comfortable. And I realize that, you know, some people, if it's a special occasion thing and they're not gonna stand at Six Flags all day in them, then they don't care, but I do. Okay, so now I'm going to test my fit. I'm going to line these two perfectly back up again. Okay, and I'm going to just basically rub around on it. And if I can feel one of those straps sticking up, then I will continue cutting. But I was pretty generous with my cuts, so I don't feel it. Except right there. Just right there. So I'll just shave a tiny bit more off that piece. All right, party people, these are good to go. Now, what I can do is go ahead and glue these together. All right, so to do that, first I'm going to get this daggum thread off here. So to do that, I'm just going to glue everywhere that there's not straps on this, because you don't want glue where your straps are. And then I'll just glue this entire thing. All right, so I'm going to use my contact cement here, and I'm just going to go nuts with it. And then when we're done gluing these two pieces together, we can glue the other one to the back side. The one that we didn't punch any holes in, we didn't make any cuts in, we just left it like it was. Okay. and then this will all get sewn together later. This will actually be one of the last things that we sew completely together, because one side of the stitch line will have to be stitched to the main tablet case. Otherwise, you have a tablet case and then you have the tablet mounted to a piece of useless leather that you worked way too hard on. When I'm doing my glue up here, I'm going to make sure that my glue goes all the way out to the edges, because that will help my burnished edges, or however I decide to do edges. I hadn't decided yet. But anyway, that will help my my edges to look prettier. It'll make it to where if I do them right, I can make them look like it's one edge, not three pieces of leather molded together. Edges are a tricky thing, and I know lots of folks struggle with them, but they're really not that hard. They just take a while. Good edges, I don't know anybody that gets a good, nicely burnished, good looking edge and, you know, just a matter of rubbing on it or something. I mean, there's usually multiple coats of rubbing and sanding and applying something to it, and we'll do lots of edge work on this video. Well, we'll do lots of it on this project. I won't do a ton of it on the video because, again, I try not to make you watch me do the exact same thing over and over and over. Again, I'm not getting glue on my straps, so be cognizant of that, please. There's not going to be glue on my straps, and there should not be on your straps. Alright, I'm going to finish smearing glue all over the back side of this, not where there's straps. And then when I'm going to wait a few minutes so the glue will set up. When I come back, we'll put the two pieces together. Alright, so got our glue nice and sticky. So now we're just going to line up corners here as best we can. I usually will line up two corners and then press everything down. So far I have one poorly lined up. Alright, I just press those two pieces together, making sure that they're really nice and pressed together. You can even use a hammer, or I don't have my squeaky toy over here, but you know, one of the little rollers like my squeaky toy. Now we're going to glue it again. Okay, see how nicely those straps all fit in there. And yeah, those cuts are ugly, but ka-chow! They don't even exist anymore. So, glue on the back of this, glue on the back of this, not where the straps are, and we can stick it together. It is okay if there's glue here where the straps are, because if there's not glue on both sides, then it's not going to stick together. But not an excess of it. You don't want a bunch of it getting onto those straps like if you had just pools of glue. If it gets on those straps, then when you pull that strap out from the other side, you'll see it come out. So, I don't feel the need to really do that on camera, but I'm going to put a nice layer of glue on here, a nice layer of glue on here, stick it all back together. When we come back, we'll start working on other parts of the project. Alright folks, it's time to start some assembly of the main body of the project. Okay, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to sew my little accent piece onto the front cover. Okay, I sewed this one and this one on before putting the lining on the cover, so that on the inside of the cover you don't have those sew lines showing. Okay, it's just one more way you can make it a little bit cleaner. You know, if you have those sew lines, then they'll get into this too and all kinds of craziness, so I just do it first. Alright, so I got to figure it out. Normally when I make a binder or something like that, I have 1 inch of overhang over the edge of my my piece. Okay, well this is more than 1 inch because we added to it. So this little piece is 3/8 of an inch longer than this one. Alright, so what we will do is we will figure out where the 1 inch plus the 3/8 is on this, and we're going to make some markings on the back just with a pencil. Okay, so again, I'm going to use my little ruler. I've got 1 inch before I even get to the grid lines, and then I'll do 3 grid lines is 3/8 of an inch. Line that up. Grab this pencil. I'm just going to draw me a light line on the back of this. I want it to be really light because this actually can be seen on the finished project. Alright, so now if I turn this piece over, you can see where those two will line up and glue to each other. I might have made my line a little bit too light. I can't see part of it. So let me just re-scribe that right quick. And all these tools rolling around. I'm terrible about putting tools away, but if I put them away during a video, then I have to walk over and get them again. Alright, a little bit heavier line. So when you set your main cover piece down, it will you're just going to line that line up with the edge of it here and glue that together, and then we'll sew that piece on. Okay, once we've sewn that piece on, we're going to come back and we'll glue the other one onto this, and we'll sew it down, and then we can line our front piece here. All right, so let's get a little bit of glue. You could also use just double-sided tape on this, you know, for a quick stick. I'm not going to be crazy careful putting this glue on here at all because this is not going to have a burnished edge or anything like that. I'm just going to run me a nice wide stripe of glue down that, and another one down this side of this. I do want to make sure that the glue is not going to seep to the inside of this or the inside of that line right there, because those are finished areas. Okay, we're gonna get that glued together. When I come back, we'll be at the sewing machine and we'll sew this first part down, then we'll glue the next layer on top of it and sew it down. So we're gonna wait a couple minutes for the glue to set. All right, got that sewn on, or stuck on there just with the glue. And I'm now back at the sewing machine, and I'm going to very carefully and slowly sew that area on. Okay, I'm going to use the inside of my presser foot as my marker, as my edge guide, I guess you could say, to get right up there on the edges of my scallops and try to keep it as uniform and straight as I can. That's one thing that really stinks when you're doing accent pieces like this, is like, you know, if you screw up the stitching on it, well, you're accenting and highlighting a bad idea, a bad part, and not a good one. So yeah, all right, so I'm going to start out with my back stitch, and then we'll run forward from there. Got my elbow over here on my reverse lever. And now we'll go forward. And again, I'm going to go extremely slow on this line because I want to follow it as well as I can and not screw it up. Nothing worse than creating a highlight on a screw up. On the original one that I showed you in the video earlier, I actually have a place where my needle accidentally went down in a spot I didn't want it to, and there's not a stitch there, but there is a little needle hole, and that's just plumb embarrassing. Alright, when I get to one of these points, I'm just going to position my needle where it would be in that point for one of the stitches. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and turn the notebook and keep on rocking. I would rather take 3 days to sew this one stitch than to have even a single stitch out of place when it's done. Okay. Before my skills on the sewing machine were as sharp as they are today, I probably would have hand sewn this back in the day just to make sure that, you know, it looked right. But I'm pretty confident in my sewing machine skills nowadays, so. Okay, again, I'm at a point, so I'm gonna put my needle down where it would be right in that point before I turn and go back down the last part of it here. We'll back stitch to complete my last stitch here. And there we go. That's now sewn on there. So not too bad at all. I'm pleased with that. So now we're going to glue up our next piece over this one. Turn the camera back around. All right. It's going to look pretty dang sharp. So all I'm going to do is place glue on the back of this, place glue all over this, but I'll make sure to keep at least a ½ an inch away, or maybe 3/4 of an inch away from the edge here. I'll stick this down, and then I'm going to repeat that exact same stitch line that I did here, but on the black piece now, and sew through all the layers. Not really a reason to have to do it all on camera. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So when we come back, that part will be done. All right, so off camera, I put the black binder over the tan one, and boy, it's looking real nice. I'm pretty pleased with it, and we can move on to the next steps. All right. So next, I want to put this little notepad in my notebook. Okay. Now to do that, just like how we sewed this binder on without being seen on the inside, we have to sew this on without it being seen on the outside, which means we have to sew it to the liner only. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up. Again, I remember I cut this piece off. Excuse me. I cut this piece oversized. It's bigger than the template that I'm supposed to use it with. Okay. But what I need to do though is I have to square off one side of this, and that would be the inside of the cover. And once I do that, then I can measure and place the piece that's going to hold the notepad in. I can measure it and center it and get it all ready to go without having to have it already cut exactly to size. Because again, I like to glue these things together and then trim off all that excess, and you have much nicer edges if you do it that way. Okay, so I'm just going to put this template up here, and I'm going to cut that one straight edge. All right, but then I'm going to take it a step further, and I'm just going to cut like a ½ inch on the top and the bottom. Okay, just so I know where this is going to glue up to the main project when it's time. So now I don't believe I actually ended up cutting out one of these yet, so let me do that right quick. And I'm going to cut it out of a 4 to 5 ounce piece that I have left over. Here's one. So just real quick, normally I have all my pieces cut out when I begin, but I skipped this one apparently. There's several pieces to this project, so. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and cut around this. excited to finish this one, being the black and the tan. I've said it a million times. I know I've even said it on this video. I don't like black leather, but this one is going to be something special with that tan accent on it. I joke with a lot of customers when they come in, the ones that are looking for crazy turquoises and purples and all that stuff. And I like brown leather. I like shades of brown. That's kind of my boring thing. You know, and when they ask me why I don't like the purple and the turquoise and all that, I'm like, well, have you ever seen a purple or a turquoise cow? All right, there's that. Okay, so we've got our piece we're going to sew it to. Yeah, it was this piece right here. All right, but let's just use it with this template here, and we're going to kind of throw it right here in the center. It doesn't need to be, you know, any specific measurement. I just want it kind of centered. So keeping in mind, I've got a pin loop going to go over here too. So let's say that this thing's going to end up being 1 1/8 inches from this side. That's easy enough. I can do that. All right. So 1 1/8 inches from the inside, the side that we cut a straight line on. So I'll go back to this ruler again. I'll go in 1 1/8 inches and get my little scratch awl, and I'm going to scribe an extremely light-handed line. I'm not going to go crazy with it. Just a very light line. I guarantee you can't see that because I can barely see it. All right, and then that's what this thing will butt up against when I sew it. All right, now I already know that it's going to be nice and straight. It's 1 1/8 inches from the outside there. Okay, I got to tell you a quick story while I get this thing ready. I'm just going to double-sided tape it down. Let me make dang sure there's enough room to do that though before I say that. I may end up gluing it if I didn't. I'm going to use the tape, but I'm going to do something crazy with it. I'm going to cut the 1/4 inch piece of tape in half and tape it down. Okay, just lengthwise. This is 1/4 inch wide. I will split the tape, and we're going to stick it down on both sides of this. Well, I'll tell you a funny story that the one about the turquoise cow reminded me of. When I was in Iraq the second time, we lived with the Iraqi army, right? And there was this little place right off the post that we lived in that had burgers and stuff, you know, like a little kebab stand that had burgers and stuff, right? And they were good. We liked them. But the colonel, he never partook. And we asked him one day, we're like, sir, why don't you ever come out there with us and grab a burger, you know, as opposed to eating these cold meals that we eat all day, every day? And he just looked at us and he was like, well, those are beef, right? And we're like, yeah. He's like, when's the last time you saw a cow? And yeah, that's the last time I ate one of those too. Because I hadn't seen a cow in almost a year. Well, anyway, I'm sure they were just goat or something, you know. That's fine. We ate a lot of goat that year. Doesn't bother me. Bothers Jenny Sue. She loves goats. Alright, so anyway, my stupid story. So I'm just going to line the side of this up with that line that I made. And I'll stick it down on both sides. Alright, just to narrate what I did, I know I did it in front of the camera, but just to tell you all about it, I took that double-sided sticky tape and laid it non-sticky side down, and then just took my scalpel and ran right down the center of it and cut it into 2 1/8 inch pieces instead of this 1/4 inch piece. Kept me from having to worry about keeping a nice straight easy glue line on here and all that, but yet my borders are still going to be extremely narrow because there's not a ton of room on the sides of this notepad to stick it in. Okay, if you get too much glue or too much sticky in there and sew it in, then you may not be able to get your notepad in there. When that does happen, I usually will take, I've got a steel ruler that's really thin, and after I sew it in, if it doesn't fit, I'll go in there with that steel ruler and just kind of pry against the edges of the stitching and everything to break that glue open, and then I can usually get it in. So if you ever have that problem, don't worry, your project's not wasted. You're just going to have to work a little harder to break all that glue off. Alright, so now I'm just going to sew these two sides down. I'll go ahead and break out the edge guide for this part so that we can do it quickly and efficiently. This drop down edge guide is absolutely the most amazing thing ever made for a sewing machine in my eyes, besides the machine itself, because I can adjust the ride height. Like right now, this is not up against the base of the sewing machine. It's lifted up about a 1/16, maybe an 1/8 of an inch, so that it will ride over this piece but up against that piece. Alright, so I'll stick my leather in there, I'll do my back stitches, and then I'll start going forward with it. The only thing I don't like about the edge guide is when it's down, it's a little bit more difficult to get my hand in here and hold my threads. So, do it this way. Alright, so I got a back stitch first. 1, 2, and 3. Oh, let's do one more because I was kind of far from the edge. And then we'll go forward. Get my beginning thread out of the way there. Alright. Now, using that edge guide, I don't have to worry about running off the edge of it. I just need to keep it up against the edge guide and sew it straight down. A lot of folks buying sewing machines ask me if they need the edge guide, and the answer is no. You don't need one. There's a lot of things you don't need, but it sure does help. I didn't have one for a long time when I started with my machine, and I'm glad I didn't, because I learned, you know, how to sew without one. But now that I have one, it does make things quicker and more efficient, and I don't have to be, I'm not going to say as careful, but I don't have to worry as much about having that straight line, because I know it's sewing a straight line as long as I have it on there. Especially like doing belts and straps and things like that, it's kind of nice. I'll start sewing, I'll get it under control, and you know, have it running on the stitch guide or the drop down guide there, and man, I'll use the other hand to drink some coffee or answer a text, or you know, all those other things I shouldn't do when I should be paying attention to my project. I've got this machine set up to go pretty slow right now. I had a customer in here playing with it the other day, and unfortunately it was set up for my speed. I felt bad for her when she hit the pedal and that sucker went nuts. So I've got it running pretty slow right now. I didn't get my reverse lever pushed in time, so I gotta make sure I put it back in the last hole before I hit reverse and do my back stitch there. Alright, so there's that. Now we will test it and make sure that the little notepad goes into it before we move on to the next step, because I'd sure hate to glue this thing down to the back piece and then find out that that's not going to work. That would be terrible. Okay. I'm anxious to get this video downloaded. I want to go get some breakfast. Look at that, like a glove. Love it when a plan comes together. All right, so we know that fits, so good to go. All right, now we have to glue these together. Okay, so we're going to slather the backside of this thing with glue. We're going to slather the backside of this thing with glue, And then we're going to line up that straight edge right there, and we'll glue it together, keeping in mind that we cut these little notches right here to know that where the top and the bottom are going to be. Okay? And yeah, no real reason to do that on camera. I'm going to put glue all over the backside of this, all over the backside of just the black, not the binder too. Okay, and then I'll line up those two lines and I'll stick those together. Okay, and then we'll create us a little pin holder for this side, and the front cover is getting close to being done. I'm going to pause the video. When I come back, we'll have this thing glued down, and we'll work on that pin holder. All right, got that glued up. I'll run over it with my squeaky toy to get it good and stuck down here. And my squeaky toy hadn't made an appearance on a couple of videos. It was starting to feel left out. So, now that that's all glued up, I'm going to go ahead and trim the liner piece off. Okay, so I'll get my scalpel out. And I'm just going to carefully cut it nice and even with the main piece there. And that way I'll have a nice pretty edge that I won't have to do a ton of sanding and stuff to get rid of all the gaps. Everywhere I work in this shop, there's just a puddle of leather scraps and thread ends and stuff at my feet, but I used to walk to the trash can 10 million times, but man, that takes a lot of time. Alright, this last little bit's being kind of stubborn, so I'm just going to cut it from the side here. Grr. There we go. All right, nice and trim and pretty. Once we go over that with a round edger and do a little bit of sanding to get rid of any glue that's left, it's going to be great. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is figure out a little pin holder for over here. The pin holder is an integral part of the tablet case because it is what the kickstand sets on. Okay. I didn't put a little piece in the template kit for the pin holder because I don't know what kind of pin you want to use. I mean, you may want to just use a regular little Bic pin. Here I have a wooden pin that a friend gave me made from Tasmanian myrtle tree, which is only available in Tasmania apparently. Guess where my friend is from. So anyway, it's just a big rectangle. You can make it as big around as you want, you can make it as long as you want, but it does need to be there because again, it is part of the kickstand. Okay, if you don't want your thing to kickstand, then you don't need a pin thing. Then again, you don't need to do half the stuff we've done. So anyway, just for example, the one on here is 4 inches long, 2 1/4 inches wide. So let's just go ahead and cut that exact measurement, and that way this one will also hold my Tasmanian myrtle pin. And I'm going to cut that out of 2 to 3 ounce. And I could use the black or I can use the tan. It doesn't matter, but I have a piece of 2 to 3 ounce tan already in my hand, so I'm going to use it. So start with a straight line. 2 1/4 by 4. I know that this ruler is 2 inches wide, so that's not wide enough. So I'm going to go all the way out here to 2 1/4. Start my cut. And I'll go up here and do 2 1/4. I normally don't do one like this, but this is just a real short little piece and it'll be alright. Start my cut. Now I'll just line up those two cuts. Normally I'd do all that with an awl or a scratch awl and stuff, and I wouldn't do more than one cut, but again, this is just a little almost waist piece, so it'll be okay. All right, now that piece needs to be 4 inches long. So we're going to start with a squared off edge. Inches long, going to be right here. All right, there it is, my pen holder. I worked really hard on it. Okay, so I need to glue it shut and then glue it to the outside edge of the notepad here. Okay? So that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to center it top to bottom. You know, using my centering side of my ruler here. I'll center it. I'll just barely put some glue in there to glue it shut on the edges here. And I'll center it, and I will glue the side that will have to be sewn to the edge, and it'll all get sewn together as we go around the project. Okay, so I'll pause the camera and I'll take care of all that. All right, so here it is. I glued my little pen holder on here. Okay, and now we are going to go ahead and finalize our stitching and everything on the whole front cover. Okay, now the plan is we will go completely around what we know to be the front cover piece, which is also including some of what's under this binding here. Okay, we're talking about that line right there. All right, now I can't see where that is when I'm on the sewing machine. You know, you can kind of see where the light hits it and changes it where the edge of that is, but on the sewing machine I can't see that well enough to make sure that I keep a straight line. So I'm going to draw that line on there. All right. So I'm going to use this grid line one more time. Good rulers. I'm hoping to instill the importance of good rulers here. And we're going to make this about 3/4 of an inch from the edge of the scallops. All right. So. But I'm also kind of pushing down on it to make sure that that's going to be far enough, you know, because we still need to stay on the leather, of course, the main body of it. Otherwise our sewing's just going to fall off and that'll look terrible. All right, we've got a good line that's right at 3/4 of an inch from the edge of the black scallop, not the tan scallop, but the black scallop. And I'll just grab me a light line here. And there's my sew line for that portion. All right, so we will sew a perimeter all the way around this thing, about 3/16 of an inch in. Okay, not quite 1/4 of an inch, but you know, you do want it wide enough that you're not worried about not hitting some of your layers. Okay, so back to the machine we go. One thing I am going to do is adjust my stitch length just a little bit, because as this gets thicker, the stitches will get smaller on the exact same setting on this machine. Every walking and compound feed machine is that way, that as you get more bulk under the presser foot, the stitches get smaller. And likewise, if I was doing thick stuff and then I went to thinner stuff, the stitches would get larger. So just a tidbit on sewing machines for folks that are new to them. And again, I'm going to give myself a very generous stitch line here, because I don't want to miss a single layer, especially when it comes around to the pen holder and stuff like that. And I'm going to be real careful and slow. Like right now, I'm about to go up over the pen holder, and I want the machine to be able to walk up onto that thing. So I'm going to go slow and make sure that it's not just pushing it off on the back side, which it actually is trying to down here. And then, as needed, I'll even use my presser foot to pedal to lift the presser foot up onto the thicker layer. All right, now we're going. Okay. We always talk, there's a simple rule when using a sewing machine. You know, first thing you should always do is check your bobbin. I put a fresh bobbin in this sucker before we started this project, and I know that bobbin will go the entire project, so we're safe. Alright, feeling around under there, I know that we got the pin holder sewn onto it well, so good. Again, I don't want to, sorry, this thing seems to have adjusted a little bit on me. Again, I don't want to miss a layer. I would rather sand off a little bit of excess on the outside of this thing than to miss a layer when I'm sewing it all together. Okay. Yeah. All right. So as we sew up this side here, we're going to get up to this point where it's going to have to crawl up onto these other layers. And again, I'm going to, if I need to, I'll use my hand wheel and my presser foot pedal to make sure that it climbs up there. But so far, it's doing it on its own, so that's okay. All right, it did good. If those aren't really thick layers to climb up, if this was trying to go up to, you know, up on top of an 8 or 9 ounce piece or something like that, we may have a little bit more trouble. All right, I'm going to place the needle right in the corner where it needs to be to go up that stitch line that we drew in. Flip my guide out of the way because it is now useless for this part of the line. Get the thing up. Okay. Turn my piece 90 degrees, and we're going to sew right up that line. I'm going to have to adjust this light so I can see that line, so I hope it's not screwing with your view too much, but I've got to see that line to make sure that this stitch is good. For some reason, the sewing machine is pulling some stitches here. A couple of them are loose. It's very likely that it's time for a needle change. I'm going to keep going because it only happened in a little section back here. But if it was continuing to happen, I would stop immediately and I would go ahead and change out that needle and then go back. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up cutting out these couple of stitches right here. Well, I'll cut out this section right here and I'll go back and re-sew over that area once I'm done. So, whoop. I'm not sure what's really wrong, but I need to find out before we get too far on it. Sometimes it has a hard time if it's, you know, doing the whole changing the thicknesses. That can be the problem. All right, I've got an issue here. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm going to pause this while I try to figure it out. I've got a little bit of a rat's nest down here. I'll figure it out. When I come back, I will tell you what happened. That way, you know, if you're having a machine, you have a similar issue. Hopefully you can fix it too. So I'm just going to pause it because you don't want to hear me cussing while I do this. Okay, I'm still not sure what happened as far as the machine goes. As you can see though, we've got quite the rat's nest going on right here. I'm going to rip the stitching out of this section and I'll go back to about here and start again, and hopefully we can make it right this time. But there's some ugly stitches all the way back here, so we're going to start way back here and start ripping our stitches out. As far as the machine goes, I can't figure out anything wrong with it. I really think it might have just been the machine going over the different thicknesses of leather. Most of the time, it'll just walk right across that, not a problem. But sometimes, for some reason, there can be a hang up there. And So it's just the nature of it sometimes. To pull these stitches out, I'm just pulling really hard on that bottom stitch that pulls that loop free, and then I'll stick an awl in there. This is just a scratch awl. It's not super sharp. It's just pointy. There we go. That was part of the problem right there, is my needle thread looks like it was split way back here. So yeah, the glitch started way back there, and then I just didn't do anything about it, I guess hoping that it would be okay, and I was wrong. I usually am. Yeah, all kinds of messed up stuff here. Alright, so I'm almost done pulling these stitches out, and then when we come back, we'll be back at the sewing machine, and I'll go back over these stitches again. Alright, so I did figure out what was wrong. I opened up my bobbin area here, and there was just, the bobbin had spun freely, and a lot of thread had just kind of tangled up inside the bobbin casing area. Not a common problem at all, but it did happen. We did get over it. I went ahead and redid my stitching here to test it out, and now I've unstitched everything but 2 stitches here on this side, and we're gonna continue on that stitch line and hopefully get back to the beginning with no further incident. So, without further ado, I'm gonna put my needle down right there in the corner stitch. And that's 2 stitches back from where I undid all my stitching, and we'll run forward with it. Still having a problem with that one little step there. I'm not sure why that one little area is giving us a hard time. That's the same place that it messed up a while ago. See if we can get past it or not. Looks like or not is going to be the answer there. I'm going to pause this again. I'm going to go through this machine and figure out why that one stitch is causing me such a hard time, and hopefully we'll get this running. Okay. One of the biggest things that I've always told people is when your machine all of a sudden gets a gremlin and it's not playing nicely, change out the needle. So I did that. Just sewed about 20 feet of sewing on a test piece, and it did fine. So let's see if we can make it over that one problematic stitch right there. Let's hope. Part of me so badly wants to just do this off camera, and that way, you know, get it done. But the other part of me is like, well, what am I teaching people that are wanting to learn if I just am like, oh yeah, I fixed it off camera, don't worry about it. So here we go. Sure we're exactly where we need to be here. Sorry about getting my head in the way. Alright, the next stitch is the one that's been giving us problems. Alright, and it gave us another problem, but I could hear what happened when it happened. There's already a stitch there from when we did the tan part here. Okay, so what it is there's so much stuff in that little, there's already so much thread in that little hole that it's pushing the needle and causing the thread to hit the shuttle hook instead of the shuttle hook just being able to grab it and wrap around it like it's supposed to. So I'm gonna try to hand wheel it back through that stitch one more time just to see if we can get it to catch. It's just not wanting to play nice at all, is it? It's just one of those rare occasions where you've just got this spot that it just doesn't want to sew. And again, it's a very rare occasion. I mean, I'll put 100 miles on this machine and that'll never happen, and then all of a sudden you got one stitch you just can't get to work. So, especially you new guys with sewing machines and gals, don't ever think it's, you know, just you. We all have problems sometimes, and yeah, you just got to figure them out. Now I think I'm sewing fine. Just had to get past that rough patch. Now we're just some stitching fools. Or maybe just fools. I'm going to make that turn so I can get in line with my stitches over here. Alright, we'll get back down to that first stitch and be done with this problematic panel. I didn't intend for that to sound that way, problematic panel, but it did. Alright, do my overstitch over my first couple of stitches here, and done. Pull this sucker out. There we are. Not bad. Only took forever. Alright, I'm gonna clip all these little threads off here, inspect all of it, and make sure that I'm happy with the stitching, and then we're gonna move on to doing the back piece. So I'll be right back with you in a moment. Alright, on to the back piece. So all I'm gonna do, the back is much simpler than the front. I'm going to glue this to this, like that. So you've watched me glue 1,000 things before. If you want, I guess I could do a video of me gluing 2 pieces of leather together for you, but I'm not going to right now. So again, I'm going to hit pause, I'm going to slather glue all over this, slather glue all over that, making sure to get all the way out to the edges. Then I'm going to stick them together, and I'll use my squeaky toy and get them good and bonded. Then we'll be back. All right, so we got this piece glued together and everything. I'm going to take my scalpel. I'm going to throw a fresh blade on here because I've dropped it a couple of times, nicked it up, carved it up, you know, messed it up. I'm going to trim off the excess on this this liner here, and then we will add the little flap that is going to connect the tablet itself. Okay, and then we can sew this onto the book. We started out with like 7 or 8 pieces of leather, and now we're down to like 3. We are at the home stretch on this project. Lots of edging to do, but that's okay. We're almost done with construction. There we go. Trimmed all that off. Okay. Now again, we have to attach this piece to that piece. Alright. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a nice little narrow strip of leather, and I don't want it to be as long as this, because when I go to sew the ends of it down, then they would get sewn down. Alright. So I only want it to be, you know, bring it in an inch or so from each corner, and put it on there, and then it doesn't need to be very wide, because I don't want this to have a lot of flop or give or anything in it. I just want it to be attached where it flaps out like it needs to. Okay, so I'll just use this little piece. Why not? So let's cut her 1 inch wide. Let's start with a straight edge. It looks straight, but it's not. Now it is. All right, I'm going to go 7/8. I'm not going a full inch. Okay. Cut that little strip off. Just threw that at my computer. Hopefully it didn't hit the video, but all right. And I will take and make sure my ends of it are square so it'll look right. But I'm going to take it and I'll center it top to bottom on the back of the book. Okay, that end square. This end is close to square. Now it's square. All right, so I'm going to take and I'll put a little bit of glue on one side of this, and then I will put a little bit of glue, or well, first I'll mark this. Let's mark this. Sorry, I'm getting excited as we're getting to the end here. All right, so we'll go center this. Okay, and then this thing is just a little over 8 inches. Okay, so we'll center it on here, and we'll just make a little indentation with our fingernail where it is on this piece, so we know where to put our glue and where not to put our glue. See those little indents? Right, there's one right there by my thumb, and another one up there by that thumb. They're very hard to see, but you can see them in person, I promise. It's all about, you know, just enough of a registration mark that you know where it is, but you don't want someone looking at your finished project to be like, oh look, there's where he marked his glue. I am just barely going to hit the edge of this with this glue. Okay, I'm not putting a lot of it on there at all. 1/8 of an inch at the widest, because we don't want to glue that flap down. We just want to stick it on there so we can sew it. There we go. All right. I'll flop that around a second so it'll dry right quick. Wipe that excess glue off my table. And alakazam, there she be. That's glued. All right. Now, the other thing we have to do is glue this to the other side of our book. Okay, again, I use a 1-inch overhang. All right, so I need to measure 1 inch in from the outside here. Scratch that, I apologize. I need that edge right there to be black. Okay, right now it's that tan underneath the black, so the edge itself is not black, and I want it to be. And I didn't finish cutting all my daggum threads here either, did I? So I'm gonna go grab some black edge ink, and we're gonna get us a little bit of edging going on here, and then we'll move on to what we were about to do. All right, got me a bottle of indelible black edge ink. Dadgummit, I didn't get a dauber. 1 second. Got it. Got me a dauber, got my indelible edge ink. I'm going to go ahead and burn down my dauber. I know I've shown this on a lot of my videos, but I will continue to until the entire world knows how to do this. This dauber is real fuzzy. I mean, it's just real fuzzy. So to get something just on the edge of this is going to be really challenging as it is. So what I'm going to do is burn it. Do this outdoors if you live in a small place, because it's literally like burnt carpet. Blow on it, let it cool off, because that did, like, it's molten basically. Now that it's cool, you can just knock the charring right off of it. Okay, like it just falls off on your finger there. So I'm going to do that over here over the floor, because I don't want to do it on my workbench and have black char stuff everywhere. Again, this does stink, so apologize to your spouse or roommate or whatever beforehand, or just do it outside. All right, so I'm going to take, this is a Berry King grooved edger. I'm going to take it and just run it right down this top corner here, just to knock that edge off. Okay, and I'll take some sandpaper here and I'm going to sand that edge a little bit too because there's glue on it. Okay, so this is just some 320 grit normal sandpaper. There's nothing special about it. Okay, now I am going to, there's a lot of fuzzies on the back side of that because of what the sandpaper just rose, so I'm just going to take my lighter right quick and just run it lightly along the back side of that. And that's going to take care of most of those fuzzies for me, and then I can run it with my finger and it'll just knock all that off. Ready. Now, edge ink. So I had to shake this bottle up a lot. The stuff, the colorant in it settles, so you got to shake it before you use it. But real simple to use. We like the Indelible brand. It, to me, it has way faster dry time. And seeing as you have to put on a couple of coats, dry time is very important. This particular piece, I may not put more than one coat on. I just need it to be black. I don't necessarily need it to be all smooth and perfect. Okay. Normally the application for this would be you put it on, you let it dry for, with this brand, only about 15 minutes. It'll be dry to the touch. You sand it, you put it on again. 15 minutes later, you sand it and put it on a third time, and now it's going to be ready to put together. It should look nice and smooth and shiny and everything. So we'll give that a minute to dry, and we'll see if we want to do other coats, if we're going to call that good, because again, this piece will be married up to the next piece. Got some on my hand right there. Married up to the next piece, so it's just, you know, nobody's ever going to really get down there on that edge and see that. But I also scream about professionalism in all my videos, so what kind of hypocrite would I be if I didn't do it right? So we'll let that dry for a minute. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and sand this back down and reapply my edge ink to this one edge. And yeah, and we'll end up doing that one more time again after this, and it'll be a nice, gorgeous, slick edge, and something we can be proud of, right? So it's already going on much smoother with the second coat than it did with the first. That's how you know it's working. Alright, I'll just set that right there on the edge of my bench. And I'm not going to do it on camera, but I will do a third coat, and then I will put back on camera how it looks afterward. Alright, so here we have the blackened edge that's finished and shiny and pretty and dry enough that we can do what we need to do next. So what I was about to do is, like I talked about, we have an inch of overhang where it's going to connect to our backside piece. Okay, so I'm going to measure out 1 inch. I'll take that same pencil that I used earlier, and I will draw me a little pencil line very lightly to mark where my glue up's going to be. Alright, and I'm going to put glue on that, and I'm going to put glue not on this side where the flap is, because we need that for the kickstand, but on this side, and I will glue those two up. Alright, no real reason to have to do it on camera. Once again, you've watched me glue 1,000 things already today, so we're going to save some film time. Okay, got that piece glued on. Turn it over, looks great. Again, we're going to have to draw in our sewing line up here, okay? And I actually, I broke one of my rules. I normally would have sewn this line also before I put the liner in, and I didn't do it. So I'm not happy about that, but I'm just now noticing it. That's what happens when I'm doing a video. I'm trying to think 3 steps ahead when I should be thinking on the step I'm doing. So we're going to have to draw in this back line just like we did on the first part. And again, with a 1-inch overhang, I'm going to go into 3/4 of an inch and sew that line. Okay, now the first line I'll sew is the one that I should have already sewn. All right, this very edge right here. And then I'll go back and I'll sew an entire square around the entire piece. All right, so back to the sewing machine. I'll show you what that looks like. Should go pretty quickly, as long as we don't have any issues. Famous last words, right? I'm going to bring that edge guide up just a little bit so I can have it right on the main body of the notebook. There we go. A little bit more. All right, and that way it'll ride right up along the edge of the binding there. Okay. So as before, we'll start with our back stitch. And then we'll run it forward. Let me get that stitch out of the way there. It's already sewn in. I'll have to cut it out in a minute. That's just my beginning thread. I didn't move it out of the way, so it got stitched in some more. Getting close. All right, I'm glad this machine decided that it wanted to act fine. I was a little worried, and I never like, when I'm making a video, I never like something to go terribly wrong, because, well, it's kind of embarrassing sometimes, but again, I just try to use it as a teaching point that, you know, stuff's going to go wrong. That's how that works. As I tell my 7-year-old, that's what we call life. All right, so now I'm going to stitch around the entire perimeter of that. Okay, and it doesn't really matter where I start. I don't like to start in a corner, so I'm not going to. So I am going to give myself a nice wide stitch area. Now, I know this video is getting really long, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pause it, and when I come back, this part will be stitched and we'll do the next part. Alright, so I got that sewn on. Alright, and now I'm just going around. I sanded all of my edges down, all of these exterior edges here, and I'm going with my edge beveler and beveling them. And I'm going to apply my edge ink. I'm going to do black on the entire perimeter here, but on this piece, the tablet holding piece, I'm going to do our clear edge ink, and it's going to look really nice. It will look, it'll have, you know, a natural colored edge to it, and then there won't be too much of the black color when you close it, and I think it'll be a nice accent. So yeah, you've already watched, I've already kind of explained how I use the edge ink and everything, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that, and when we come back, we'll attach the final pieces. Alright folks, I wanted this video to be under 2 hours long, but that means I have 3 more seconds to wrap it up. So we did our black edge ink all the way around the perimeter of the main body piece. And we did just the clear edge ink around the perimeter of this piece. Now, the last step that we have is to sew these 2 pieces together, and we are done. I only did 2 coats of edge ink on both these pieces so far. I will do a third, but I've got to get this video uploaded like right now. So I'm going to glue this piece down to that little 3/4 inch strip that we did there, and then I'm going to sew it, and there it is. We're done. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to glue it on there, and then once the glue is ready to go, I will I'll have this pointed to the sewing machine again, and we'll finish it up. All right, so here we are at our last assembly step, which is putting the tablet holder onto the rest of it. I'm going to do something that I preach all the time not to do, which is I'm having to sew with my presser foot right on the edge of my leather. Every once in a while you just got to do stuff you're not comfortable with, and this is one of those times. But I mean, I can't stick the whole book under the throat of the machine, but I can stick this part of it. So here we go. We're going to backstitch a couple of stitches, and I'm going to be very careful holding the book to make sure that that presser foot doesn't slide off the edge of that leather. Holding it very, very firmly, because like I said, if that presser foot slips off, then I'm going to have a stitch that's so far out of whack from all the others. I would sure hate to mess it up this late in the game. All right. Do our back stitch here, and we are done. This project is complete. Again, I'm going to put a little bit more of the edge ink on just to make sure we've got nice shiny smooth edges. But as far as this instructional video is concerned, this project is complete. So all right, hopefully you enjoyed watching this one. It is a really fun build. You can learn a lot of new things with this one. Again, this template is only going to be available at Tandy leather stores or on their website. They're actually waiting on me to upload this last video so they can put them on their website. So that's why I've got to get this done. So anyway, again, I'm Aaron Heiser of Maker's Leather Supply, and we appreciate you watching, and subscribe to our channel if you like what you see and you want to learn more, and also follow Tandy Leather Factory and their channel as well. So have a great day.